This is a stimulus update related to stimulus check we're hoping for, the PPP, the unemployment, the stimulus package, HEROES Act, the Skinny Act, the HEALS Act, the Restart Act, the Problem Solver Act. I think that we are gaining some momentum, but here's what you're going to find maybe a mind blower. Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm JJ the CPA. Thanks for tuning in for this stimulus update here on September 19th. I wanted to go through what I think is going to happen this upcoming week with some unlikely alliances. Now, do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed, please click that button. I've got a number of different kinds of videos coming to you with a 27-year practicing CPA veteran experience. Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi, President of the United States, Speaker of the House. I think we could all agree that they would probably be the epitome, if you looked it up in a dictionary, of political enemies. Maybe political arch enemies. What is going on here is in the last 24 hours of the week, last week, Pelosi came out and made a very bold, strong move, which was she announced that the House will not recess until there is a stimulus bill. That is great news for all Americans, because what that says is that half of Congress, the House, is going to make sure there's a stimulus bill before they go home. Now, they're supposed to recess, I believe, October 2nd. So they have a couple of weeks, which also tells us that it may be up against the deadline. The Republicans did put into play a skinny bill that was $650 billion. The Democrats in May passed the HEROES Act, which was $3.3 trillion. So roll back before they all recessed, before their late summer break going into Labor Day, and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, if you will, came down from $3.3 trillion down to $2.2 trillion, and they've sat there. When the Senate adjourned, and the Senate, to their credit, did stick around an additional week before they recessed to see if a deal could be struck. And at that time, they had the HEALS Act. HEALS Act was around 1.2. As things were progressing, they were thinking they'd be around 1.5, and we'd be maybe within $500 billion from a deal being struck. Everybody went to recess. Labor Day occurred. We all came back. And the skinny bill was introduced by the Republicans in the Senate. It didn't pass. The skinny bill was at $650 billion. So the Republicans went down. It's really not the right way to go with negotiating. At least maybe hold your position where they were at 1.5, which they more than chopped that in half. Now, where we're at is this. The HEROES Act did include stimulus checks, unemployment. Stimulus checks at $1,200, unemployment at $600 a week. It did not include anything related to PPP. Now, what was the difference between the $3.3 trillion that the House passed, which is the HEROES Act, down to their 2.2, was really aid to the state and local governments. Now, when the Skinny Act was introduced, the $650 billion by the Republicans, it did include stimulus checks, it included unemployment, and it included PPP. So what's common here is that unemployment and the stimulus checks are in common. The PPP is not in common. So I think we can all count on, there's just nothing new, that there's going to be stimulus checks, that there's going to be unemployment. I feel confident there's going to be PPP. So with Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and I believe it was on Thursday, the 17th of September, when she proclaimed, the House will not leave until there is a stimulus deal done. The great negotiator, as President Trump has been called before he took office, saw his opportunity. Now, let's be clear, he has, in essence, not necessarily been on the sidelines, but he has been in the Oval Office saying, I'm ready to sign something, let's go. We know at the beginning of August, he did put together what he could with executive orders. It provided for up to 5 weeks, 6 weeks, depending on where you're at, of unemployment, up to $300 from FEMA. He invited the states to add $100 to that. There was and is the payroll deferral of Social Security tax normally withheld from employees. It's something. The moratorium and the student loan. So from the perspective of the president, he did all he could. And if you look at it carefully, he kind of made it clear here's all he could, meaning kind of makes everybody understand that this really is in Congress's hands. So when Pelosi on Thursday announces smartly, and I think provides relief to millions of Americans, that they're going to do their job until they strike a deal. Now, surprisingly, the Republicans did not take that and run with it. They didn't then proclaim themselves that they will be here until a deal is done. So I'm not sure who's advising the Republicans. I'm not sure who's advising the Republicans in the Senate, let's say. But Trump basically took up that opportunity. I don't think Nancy Pelosi was offering an olive branch, but I think what she was doing is making it clear, at least her side, let's just call it the House side, which would include the Democrats, are committed to getting a stimulus deal done. Trump sees that now as an opportunity because the Republicans went the other way. If you're a negotiator, which again, Trump would probably be known as a negotiator. If you're a negotiator and you see that one side is going backwards, going down, they're headed to a losing position. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the president has then switched parties. I don't think that he's abandoned the Republican Party. But what he did is he put himself in that triangular position, which worked famously so many different times for President Clinton. And he had an advisor that really, really helped him perfect triangular communication that put President Clinton in a very strong position of negotiating. So what we're looking at now is that Trump, who has already been saying, let's get a deal done. Let's get stimulus checks out and PPP, unemployment. Again, went to even doing the executive order to show he meant business about the unemployment. So Trump now has seen that this side is ready to negotiate, because when you say you're not going to leave town, that means we're ready to negotiate. And they've held at 2.2. And Nancy Pelosi has said, well, we're not going to come down any further because we're not being presented anything that's realistic. So when you go from the HEALS Act that's 1.2 trillion that grew to maybe 1.5 trillion, even though the HEALS Act in the Senate never passed, and then you come back and you offer a skinny act and it's more than half, I'd have to agree with the Speaker of the House that nothing has been realistically been brought to the table to negotiate with. Now, here comes up the road right behind what occurred with the Speaker of the House as well as the President of the United States is a bipartisan group out of Congress called the Problem Solvers Caucus. And the Problem Solvers Caucus came up with what's really been called the Problem Solvers Act, a $1.5 trillion deal, something that could be turned into an act. It includes $500 billion for state and local governments. It includes PPP, unemployment, stimulus checks, really hit all the check marks that I think everybody's wanting in terms of trying to have a well-rounded type of stimulus package the next go around. Now, I do feel like potentially the Speaker of the House commented too quickly on it because she did indicate that there were things not in that bill, but actually were very clearly in the bill. And Representative Max Rose out of the House, who's a Democrat out of New Jersey, I'm pretty sure that's right, has really kind of raised or kind of has risen to the occasion of being a mouthpiece for the Democrats in terms of getting a deal done. So the Problem Solver Caucus is made up evenly of Democrats and Republicans. It has co-leaders, a Democrat and a Republican, and they came to the table and they put together a deal. So next week, when we go into the week of the 21st here of September, the unlikely alliance that we're going to see, and I doubt that most likely first starting with the Speaker of the House would ever want to admit or see or recognize that there's an alliance going on with her or the Democrats or the House, take your pick, and the White House. But that's really what's going to happen here, because Trump, being the negotiator and has been put into a power position, will now be able to broker a deal, which puts him on the winning side, either side. And when the problem solvers came up with their act, I believe the president's going to take that and run with it, because it is a wonderful beginning, a very even, down the middle negotiation, so to speak, Republicans and Democrats alike, and there's 50 of them. Might be 52 with the leadership. But you have now 50 Democrats and Republicans in the House that are bringing something that they agree on, and then word spreads to the other Democrats, word spreads to the other Republicans. And Trump, I believe, will be taking that deal up, so to speak. He'll probably make some modifications to be able to put his stamp on it, so to speak. But he'll be able to then take that to, the Democrats take that to the House and indicate, listen, here's a really good deal. You've already got support for it in Congress. I think Nancy didn't want to necessarily be aligned with the president or the Republicans. It's an election year. So that might have been why she denounced the problem solvers bill so quickly. But what that allowed for is Trump to now have even more leverage. I think Pelosi had an opportunity to maybe even get in front of that, minorly take credit for it, minorly show that her side of Congress is taking action. But I think that that amount of hatred, political hatred, has really clouded a lot of judgment up in D.C., clearly on both sides. I mean, my goodness, really clouded judgment over on the Republican in the Senate side. So unlikely alliances will come into play, but Trump will create the alliance. It won't want to be seen as alliance on the other side, but nonetheless it will be, because the Democrats, the House of Reps, the Speaker of the House is ready to sit until there is a deal. The president isn't going anywhere. There are no recesses for the president. So he will be ready to deal and is dealing. You now have something that's been brought right up the middle with bipartisan support that the House or the Speaker of the House has snubbed, that the president is taking. And part of what the president communicated, which we know is by a tweet, is that he will get the Republicans to come up. Position of power. He will get the Republicans to come up. So the Republicans have nowhere but to go up. They're at $650 billion. The other side, so to speak, the House, the Democrats, the HEROES Act, has been reduced down to $2.2 trillion. They already came down $1 trillion. The Republicans are going to have to come up $1 trillion, and Trump will be able to get credit for that. Now, if I really take an extra step back, maybe that was the Republicans' plan all along. I doubt it. But they're putting the president in a power position. I think, though, the stars have aligned that in the next 2 weeks there will be a stimulus package passed. I believe it'll include unemployment. I think it'll be around $400 a week. I think it will include the stimulus checks, which will be the same as last time. And it'll include PPP with a qualifier, indicating that you had to have been financially affected by the COVID pandemic financially, most likely comparing gross revenues in 2020 to 2019 with specified periods being compared. It will for sure include aid to the state and local governments. And I think that, as frustrating as it is on how long it has taken to get there, I think that it will probably end up being a pretty well compromised bill. Now, I think it's probably 3 months too late. I think people are still going to be relieved that there is a bill, but surprised at how long the money will take to actually hit everybody's bank accounts. Stimulus checks could go out probably within 10 days. I'm sure they're rared up, ready to go at the IRS to send out those $1,200 checks. They're just now redoing what they already did. So that'll probably move quickly. PPP, they've already got our pipeline and things identified in the banks. I'm sure they'll have to have new guidelines. Unemployment, the states are ready to probably just take that up. They've already got it all in play. So as long as there's not a lot of differences with unemployment and how you qualify. I still think that where we are, if we're at the beginning of October, when a deal is then struck and put into law, president signs it, we're talking 2 to 3 weeks, which is going to put us right before the election, the end of October, early November. So I want you to pay attention to who's doing what now. Who's doing what now in September? Don't base it on what arrives at the end of October. Base it on who's doing what right now. This is when it's mattering as we go into the latter part of September 2020. Pay attention to who's doing this right now. Do not let your representative, your senator, at the end of October be the rooster taking credit for the sun coming up. Let's not be allowing those politicians to take credit. Be sure that you're paying attention to what your senator, what your congressperson is doing now. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. If you made it to here, you're probably one of my regular subscribers. Thank you so much. If you've made it to here and you're not, I really appreciate you listening and hearing this out. And if you would, hit subscribe. All right, hey, have a great day, and then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. All right, hey, have a great one.